problems. Problems. Problems, problems, problems. I just left a meeting a few minutes ago that was filled with, guess what? Tons of problems. One of which, it turns out, is going to cost me about $190,000. Someone made what we call a mistake. That person no longer works with me. They made the mistake a while back, but we found out about it today. And so I got to deal with that unique problem. And I got a chance to apply the things I'm going to talk to you about on this tape. So I can tell you today that the things I'm going to share with you worked really well for me this afternoon and will show me how to take this thing that was a problem, turn it into a bit of a challenge, and actually turn it into an opportunity. It's not resolved as of yet, but it's well on its way to be an opportunity. And I don't just mean by having a better attitude, although that certainly is useful, and we're going to talk about that as well. But also showed me how to find something in that situation that I could take advantage of, that I could utilize to create even greater results, even greater success. Now, how do you take something from just being a problem into something that you really are empowered by? Not, again, just by being positive and going, I'm happy about this problem. That's not enough, although it's not a bad start, but it isn't enough by itself. And before we do that, though, I want you to think about something. What do you feel inside your body? What do you think when somebody says, we've got a problem? Or you and I are going to have to solve this problem together. Or the company's got some more problems. Or you know what? Well, by the time you get back, we're going to have to solve all these problems. For most people, when they think of a problem, they think of something that gets in their way, something that prevents them from truly achieving what they want. Problems usually come up when we set up a goal, because as soon as we set a goal, the only thing that prevents us from getting it are these quote-unquote obstacles, the things that get in our way. A lot of people call them stumbling blocks. And I'm sure in the short term, they look like stumbling blocks. But in the long term, I'm here to tell you that most of these things we call problems may really be stepping stones. I know it doesn't look like it at the time, and I know that sounds like just being positive, but I think there's something more here. And also, I want you and I to remember something. We're going to have to deal with problems whether we want to or not. Because the reality is how well you'll deal with problems will probably determine the quality of your life more than almost anything else you're going to do in your lifetime. See, anybody can be positive, anybody can be up when everything is flowing, when everything's going well. The real question is, how do you do when you have to deal with these big fat problems, with these major challenges, when you give your all, when you give 1,000%, when you put yourself on the line, and it still rains on your parade, things still fall apart. That's where we get to find out what we're really made of as human beings, and that's what I think the purpose of problems are. Now, I have two questions for you I wanted to start out with here, because I asked myself these questions the other day. First one was, well, a lot of people say, well, I'm just trying to rid myself of all these problems. Well, I don't know if you can. I think the first question is, can you ever really get rid of problems? And I think the answer you and I will both agree to is there's no way. Problems are going to be a part of our life as long as we're here. And the best study life is how it is, not how we wish it would be. We can do affirmations all day long, but we're still going to have these challenges out there that we're going to have to look at, and not just look at, but do something about if we want to shape the quality of our life and impact our personal destiny. So the second question I had is, well, if you can't get rid of problems, is there a purpose for them? Is there a reason they're there? I mean, gravity can be a pain in the tail. You know, it keeps you down here. It keeps you from doing certain things. But the reality is, you can look at it in the short term and say, it keeps me from doing things. Or you can say, gravity is a force and it has a purpose. There's a reason it's here. Maybe what I need to do is figure out how to utilize gravity. And by the way, gravity doesn't keep you from flying. Gravity can be utilized so you can fly in a directed manner. Without any gravity at all, you'd have a tough time flying from here to where you want to go. So I think that we may want to look at there's a purpose for problems. There's a reason why our Creator created these wonderful little experiences that we've created a label of problems for. And I suggest that they are here to benefit us. And I think that what determines the quality of our life, in my own personal experience, is not how big of problems we have, because almost everybody you meet has got big problems. And you know what? If you've got small problems, then you're probably bored. You need something that's going to test you, that's going to drive you, it's going to push you forward. And what I found, though, is that what makes the biggest difference is your attitude about the problem. Probably the most powerful example for me was in my own business. The first business I developed, Robbins Research. I found myself in a position where I was on the road, pushing like crazy, doing everything I knew how to do, stretching myself as far as I knew how to stretch myself, trying to give everything I could give. And I come home and find out that I got a partner that's embezzled $250,000 and run my company $758,000 in debt. That'll get your attention. That was a bit of a problem, and everybody said it was a problem that could not be solved, but I didn't buy that idea. So I have this core belief that says there's always a way if you're committed. And I found a way within a year to turn everything around. God, solving that problem created muscles that you cannot believe in me. It's like you can throw out a problem at me like the one that happened today, and I look at it and I go, okay, what do we need to do to make this thing into our advantage? How do we use it? How can we make this thing work? How can we use it today? How can we use it tomorrow? Well, one way I can use it is use it in my talk today, chatting with you and say, hey, here's something I can share with you. And I can honestly in my gut say to you, I handle it well using what I'm going to share with you. That's kind of nice. It makes me have to use this stuff. See, we can utilize anything when we become masters of it. So what are the steps to really handling problems? Well, step number 1 is simple. Take a new look at what problems mean. See, it's the meaning that determines how we feel. If I get all upset and say, gosh, $190,000, how I have to pay this price all because this idiot screwed up a long time ago? How come this is always happening to me? Why can't I turn this thing around? Why do we always have these challenges? Hey, if I take that approach, I'm going to be angry. And I don't know about you, but if I'm really angry, I'm not usually at my most resourceful self. Haven't you found that to be true as well? I mean, when you're really upset, you get hooked into the problem and you stop focusing on the solution. Hey, listen, I can be angry all day long, but the person that was involved in my company that time has not been here, hasn't been here for 3 years. In fact, you know what's great? What's great is that I know I have a problem. I have a challenge that's become an opportunity. But knowing there's a problem there is what you want. You don't want to be one of those people that says, oh, I have no problems. Or you see a problem coming up and you turn your head the other way and you try and pretend it's not there. You know, you're trying to build a garden and you see some weeds, so you turn your head and you go, there's no weeds, there's no weeds, there's no weeds. Hey, they'll come and take your garden. See, I know there's a problem that's exciting. What's exciting about that, and I'm using exciting as a way to change the way I feel about it. I could have used a different word to describe it. But what's exciting is I hired a new CFO, a chief financial officer for that organization. And he's only been with us 3 days. And he discovered from 3 years ago a discrepancy to the tune of $190,000. That's pretty exciting. It's exciting because it means now in the future I'll have better information and I can handle problems early. I can handle them in advance. I can solve the problem before it even occurs. That's the point we want to get to. So we don't want to be upset, because when we're upset, we're no longer focused on the solution. And if we start focusing on, oh gosh, I got all these problems and therefore I must be screwing up, sometimes they're there because you haven't learned a lesson yet. I think what a problem is a lesson begging to be learned, begging to be utilized so we can become more. And I certainly have learned more about the economics of that particular business in one day. And I promise you, I won't forget it. Reason is it's somewhat painful. And sometimes pain is real useful because it makes us pay more attention than we just get pleasure. I'm a big believer that sometimes in life, when people do really well, they just party. And when they fail or they have a challenge or they have a major problem, they begin to ponder. And out of partying, very few things change. But out of pondering, you come up with key distinctions that cause you to grow like crazy. And I found that to be true in my life. Does that mean you should seek out problems? Well, I got a question for you. Do you have to seek them out, or do they seem to show up? Again, you can say all day long, I don't have any problems, but I think what you're doing is really kidding yourself. Deluding yourself would be a better description. Certainly they're out there. In fact, maybe that's what life's all about. Maybe what happens in life is we're going along, we start to head out for something, and we have what we've learned to deal with in our life. We have this circle of influence, all these things that we've mastered in our life, our ability to make a difference, our ability to share with others, our ability to manage our own emotions. But there's some things that seem to be just outside our comfort zone, outside what we're comfortable with dealing with. Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't know what it is for you. Maybe what's outside of you is public speaking. You know, you can handle all kinds of things within yourself, but get you in front of a group, ooh, that's a problem. That's outside what you're comfortable with. You don't know quite how to deal with that. Or maybe for you, it's you're able to master all these things within your business. You can public speak, but smoking. And you haven't dealt with that, and that's outside. That's a problem, and it keeps coming up because you try to get on an airline now, and now there's a problem. They don't let you smoke. They won't let you smoke on a whole long flight, 5 hours across the country. Drives you a little crazy. You got a new problem. What you really have is an opportunity, a chance to take a new look at what you do and whether or not it supports you. But the key here is, what do we do with it? See, if all you do is get angry, you get mad and say, how dare they create this problem for me? What will happen is you won't solve the problem. And if you don't solve the problem, if you go out to deal with a problem and you hit at the edge of your comfort zone, imagine like a circle of influence, and there's an edge to it. If you retreat and don't break through your comfort zone and handle that problem, if you make everybody else wrong for creating the problem, or you get angry because you have to deal with the problem, what you'll probably do is retreat. And when you retreat, you don't get any bigger as a person. Your sphere of influence stays exactly where it is. And if you keep doing that, does the problem go away? If you just get angry? No, usually what happens is, boink, another problem shows up. And you don't deal with that. You run out to the edge of where you're comfortable and you go, oh, I don't have to deal with this. This makes me mad. Why should I have to deal with this? And you come back to your center and you don't deal with it, and boink, there's another one. Next thing you know, you're surrounded by these things called problems. Till finally you get to a threshold where your brain says, I can't take it anymore. There's too much pain here. And you push out and you break through what you're comfortable with and you handle the problem. Now, what happens to you in that moment when you handle a problem? Can you remember a major problem you handled and how you felt when you handled it? Well, what usually happens is you expand. All of a sudden, you don't just handle that problem, but who you are becomes more. And a lot of the other things that have been hanging on the edge, you handle them so easily. It's interesting. I found that in life that for every disciplined effort, there's usually a multiple reward. That when you go out and you push to the edge, you break through, you handle this thing, all of a sudden, all these other things have been bugging you. They're so easy to deal with now because you have become more. The purpose of the problem is to expand us. The purpose of the problem is to make us more. In fact, the word problem in its original Latin root means something thrown forth. Isn't that interesting? I wonder who's doing the throwing. Maybe it's us. And by the way, when you expand, you handle this problem and you're a much bigger person, you can deal with so much more in your life. What happens with a very short period of time? Boink, another problem shows up. It's like, I thought I got done with all these problems. But hopefully what's happened is you've dealt with that problem and now you got a better quality of problem. So you constantly are expanding. So the key here is, and let's go through 11 quick keys, by the way. I jotted these down today as a reminder to myself of how to deal with problems. Number one, I've already mentioned. Change your whole attitude towards problems. Change what problems mean to you. Turn them into a device for growing. Turn problems into your workout machine. Turn problems into your gymnasium. Turn problems into your opportunity to expand and grow. Turn problems into a lesson that's begging to be learned and begging to be utilized. Here's the second key. If you want to deal with problems in a more effective way, change the questions you ask yourself about problems. And I've already alluded to this a little bit, but let's be specific. What I mean by this is, if you walk around asking, why does this always happen to me? How come I can't turn this around? Why did this person do this to me? Two things occur. Number one, you're at the effect. You no longer feel like you're in control. And when we don't feel like we're in control of our own life, we get a little crazy, don't we? Haven't you experienced that in your life? So we've got to realize that the questions we ask ourselves also determine the way we feel and the kind of solutions we come up with. Remember, ask and you shall receive. If you say, how come I can never lose weight? You're asking a pretty lousy question, and you're going to get a lousy answer to solve that problem. If you say, how come I can never lose weight? You've basically said you never will lose weight. Your brain will say, well, how come you can never lose weight? It's simple. It's because you're a pig, right? Your brain's going to start cracking up. If you say, how come I can't turn things around? Your brain will come up with answers because you're not smart. You can't figure it out. You're not good enough. A great way to solve problems is ask a better quality of question. Ask yourself, how can I turn this around? How can I utilize this situation? What have I already learned from this? What could I learn from this if I really wanted to? What is the advantage of this situation if I look at it in another context? What's actually funny about this? So if you ask yourself that question enough, you may come up with an answer. Or maybe a question like, will this problem even matter 10 years from now? See, questions can help you to change the way you feel and therefore the way you deal with problems. And questions are the source of answers. If you want to solve problems and you haven't solved one, you haven't asked the right question yet. Keep changing the questions you ask until you come up with a question that makes sense, one that'll make you feel better, but also one that'll get you to act in a way that creates a solution. And thirdly, if we want to handle problems, one of the things we have to do is change the language we use. Now, I've used the word problems many times here. I don't usually use it. I'm using it to get your attention because I think most people use the word problems. 90% of the time when I talk about a problem, I talk about it as a challenge. Now, that seems so simplistic. Does it really work? Does it really have an impact? Well, think about this. The language you use to describe the way you feel determines the way you feel. I teach something now called transformational vocabulary. It's a title for something I came up with about a year ago when I was sitting in a meeting and I noticed that something happened that affected 3 people in the room, of which I was one of them. But all 3 of us responded totally differently to the exact same situation. One person went into rage. I got really angry. And the third person, they were basically annoyed. Now, that's a pretty radical difference since we're all equally impacted by the situation that had occurred. What I noticed was we all had a different emotional response to the same situation, and part of the reason clearly was we had a different label to describe our emotion. That is, we were all feeling these sensations coming into our body, but then when we tried to describe it to ourselves, one person said, I'm in rage. I said, I'm angry. The other person said, I'm annoyed. I thought, what if I would have said, this experience annoys me? I began to giggle a little bit. I thought, annoys me? That's not a very intense emotion. I thought, isn't that interesting? What if from now on, when I start to get angry, I said I'm annoyed? And I realized I've done that for years because instead of calling things problems, I call them challenges. See, if you got a problem, it makes you emotionally feel like there's a weight on your shoulders. There's something that's in your way. But if you got a challenge, that gives you another sense of meaning about it. A challenge is usually associated with something positive. Something's going to make you grow. Something's going to expand. So I think it's a more accurate description of what problems are. Challenges. And the truth of the matter is, you can take a challenge and turn it into an opportunity. If somebody comes along and says, we got an opportunity here, it totally changes the way you feel. Totally changes the way you focus your mind. Totally changes your approach. So if you look at something and say, what's the opportunity in this? you're going to find that can be handled more quickly. Now, it's sometimes hard to go from feeling like you got a problem to feeling like you got an opportunity in one breath. It can be done. It can be done just by disciplining your own emotion. But as a very minimum, you can certainly go from we got a problem to we got a challenge here. And maybe even an opportunity if we find a way to use it. And what that does is it makes your brain begin to look for solutions, look for opportunities. And you got to remember, whatever you focus on in life, whatever you ask for, you'll get more of. If you keep asking, why isn't this working? You'll get more reasons why it's not working. If you begin to ask, hey, what's the potential opportunity? And you keep asking, ask and you shall receive. Every convenience you and I have today is the result of somebody who took a problem, made it a challenge inside their head to solve that problem, and as a result, they really created an opportunity for all of us. Classic example I was reading about the other day is the gentleman who started Xerox. You know why Xerox machines were ever made, why they were built? Because the gentleman who created Xerox was a transcriptionist, and he got arthritis, and it was too painful. So in order to solve that problem, he came up with this study, the research that generated the Xerox machine. And by the way, nobody wanted to buy it at first. That was a new problem he had to solve. Thing called marketing. Let's go to step number 4. Number 4 is, if you want to change how you feel about a problem, change the way you're using your body. What do I mean by that? Well, if you've studied any of my other work, you know that the way you feel moment to moment determines how you behave. If you're feeling physically tired, wiped out, frustrated, angry, hurt, that translates in the way you hold your body, the way you stand, the way you breathe, the way you gesture. Even your tone of voice begins to change when you feel frustrated or overwhelmed, and it changes the way you are. But if you want to change the way you feel, the quickest way to do that is instantly change the way you're using your body. A clapping of the hands, a moving, a getting up and taking a walk, a stroll, a run, a bounce on your rebounder, a huge deep breath in with an explosive breath out, saying the word yes with some power while you make a strong gesture. Anything that makes a radical change in the way you're using your physical body, the pace at which you're moving, the pace at which you're speaking, will instantly change the way you feel. And I'm sure you've found that when you're really exhausted, I don't know about you, but I know when I'm physically wiped out, boy, problems seem a lot bigger, don't they? I mean, when you're really at the edge, let's say you've got physical pain in your body, aren't things that normally don't bother you at all, aren't they huge? I know I found myself sometimes snapping at people in the old days when it really wasn't about them. It was that I was in physical pain in my body. I was stressed. And what I found is what I got to do is change the way I'm using my body, change my breathing pattern, take a nice deep breath, take a little walk or a stroll, and come back, and I can handle the problem a lot quicker. So if you're having trouble, if you're starting to feel quote-unquote stuck, get out of that state by changing the way you're using your body. That's key number 4. Key number 5, be honest about the problem. And I've already kind of related to this, but it's a good thing to remind yourself. Don't pretend it's not there. See, I used to be the kind of person that in my business, I didn't want to know about the problems. I was out there busy trying to help people. Gosh, if I have to think about these problems too, I'm going to be overwhelmed. And that's how I got in the position where this $190,000 thing happened 3 years ago. That's how I got in a position 3 years ago where somebody embezzled all this money. I'm still finding out things because I didn't want to look at reality, because I didn't want to have to deal with the problem. I just wanted to pretend it wasn't there. Be honest with yourself. If there's a problem, face it and handle it. And the way to do it's real simple. Number 1, see it as it really is. Don't kid yourself. Be accurate. Don't see it worse than it is, though, either. That's a great way to overwhelm yourself. And secondly, see it better than it is. See, take a look at what it can become. Become a possibility person about the situation. Ask yourself, if I turn this thing around, how could it benefit me? If we turn this thing around, how could it make it stronger or better? If I'd already turned it around, how did I do it? And then the third key is, once you've seen it how it is and you've seen it better than it is, then make it the way you now see it. Make it better than it is. Take those actions that are necessary, realizing it may be small steps at first, but if you make any progress towards solving a problem, you'll get momentum. And momentum will carry you, and all of a sudden you'll come up with bigger and better solutions till pretty soon that problem really is an opportunity. Key number 6 to solving problems is simple. Control the focus of your mind. Now, questions are one of the best ways to do this, but here's a ratio that I've used for years in solving problems. Very simple. Think of it this way. If you got a problem, spend 20% of your time on the problem, 80% of your time on the solution. If you find anybody who's got a problem that persists over and over again, they can't come up with a solution, I can tell you why right now. Most of the time is they violated all the things we've talked about so far. They have a horrible attitude about it. They're angry. They think, my gosh, I'm not the source of the problem. How come I have to solve it? Which makes them angry. It doesn't lead them to the solution. They're asking lousy questions of themselves. They're in a situation where they look at it as this big problem that's outside their control, and they're in a position where they aren't changing the way they feel physically. They're just getting more and more angry. They're stuck in one position, storing up all that negative emotion. They're not being honest with themselves. They're trying to pretend like it's not there, or they're trying to say it doesn't have to be dealt with, or somebody else should deal with it. Problems don't go away until we take responsibility. But the key is, if you want to turn it around, those people that aren't turning around, they're focusing on the problem 80% of the time, or 90, and only 10 or 20% of the time on the solution. Turn this ratio around. See, the best way to handle a problem is focus continuously, once you've defined it, on what is the solution. I have a strategy I call decimate a problem. And when you decimate a problem is you take out a journal or a chalkboard or some poster paper, and you get a bunch of people in the room, and you sit down, which is what we did today, and you brainstorm like crazy, what are solutions to this problem? What are 100 ways to destroy this problem? We go after the problem like it's our prey. We're the hunters. We're not being hunted by the problem. We're in charge. We're in control. Tell me 100 ways we're going to destroy this problem. And what we begin to do is brainstorm. Now, here's the key. If you start to write down an idea like, well, here's one way to deal with it, and then you go, no, that's not going to work, you'll never get to the solution. If you want to decimate a problem, then what you've got to do is just brainstorm like crazy and know that maybe 90% of your ideas, maybe 50%, maybe 10%, I don't know, but a large percentage of them aren't going to be worth a darn. They're not going to solve the problem. But don't judge your ideas. First, get them out. Because when you got 100 ways to destroy a problem up on the board, some of those ideas may not work, but as you look at them, you come up with an even better idea. So take out your journal and decimate the problem by focusing on the solution for a good 20 minutes straight, just brainstorming, keeping the pen going, not allowing yourself to stop and analyze your solutions, just one after another after another. And even if you think you've already solved the problem, decimating the problem is more than solving it. Because as you now come up with 100 ways to deal with it, you'll come up with solutions to future problems. You'll start coming up with things you never thought of before. If you start to feel overwhelmed by problems, realize this: you're probably overchunked. What do I mean by that? I mean to chunk things down. You're trying to solve too many problems at one time. Stop and look at one possible solution for one area of the problem. See, that's critical. Sit down and define the problem, and then spend 80% of your time focusing on the solution. But as you do it, focus on one aspect of the problem. And what's several solutions to that one aspect? What's another aspect of the problem? What are several solutions to it? Sometimes you try and solve the whole problem all at once, you're going to have a challenge. But you won't have any challenge if you chunk it down. It's a critical strategy for dealing with problems. Here's key number 7. Number 7 is anticipate problems. Anticipate them. Be ready for them in advance. Does that mean you should walk around looking for problems, expecting them? No. You want to expect the best and plan for the worst. If there's anything I've learned being in business, and business is a great microcosm for life because it magnifies things. You get feedback a lot quicker. And fortunately, I've learned how to really succeed in there. But what I've really learned is I can't just solve problems. If we're really going to be effective, got to anticipate them. Now, not being negative, not being wrong, just saying, what could possibly be screwed up here? What could probably get messed up? If something was going to get screwed up, what would most likely go out? And how can we deal in advance so it never even has to happen? See, what you're really doing is you're anticipating what a problem is for a few moments and then coming up with a bunch of solutions before it happens. See, then you can have a lot less problems. Are you going to rid yourself of them completely? Of course not. But you can limit the number of them and hopefully get to the point where you get a better quality of problem, which is one of our goals, to increase the quality of the problems, not to get rid of them, so that we're constantly expanding, so that we can deal with almost anything that used to drive us nuts. Now it's easy to do. Now we've got the muscle to handle that easily. We just want to keep expanding. The bottom line is I've got a strategy that's worked really well in my business. And if we had it 3 years ago, I wouldn't have had this $190,000 learning experience. And that is this. We had back then challenges, things that we knew could come up, and we had a plan to deal with them. But what we didn't have was several plans. What do I mean by this? Well, in my companies, we have a set of what we call organizing principles. What they are strategies that help us to eliminate most of the problems we used to have to deal with. In fact, having these strategies today have turned us around. It took us from the things that happened 3 years ago, where we were almost bankrupt, into the largest personal development firm of its type in the United States today. We went from being in the hole to a company that do almost $50 million in sales. That kind of turnaround happens because you have strategies that make sense. And I'll tell you the critical strategy, and it's the same as number 7 here. We look at in advance, what are some of the challenges that could possibly come up? Let's be positive, but let's also be real. And as we do that, we say, okay, what's our plan for handling it if it comes up? We don't stop there, though. We say, if that plan doesn't work, what's our backup plan to it? And then we say, if that backup plan didn't work, what would be our third backup plan? Because you know something? I don't care how positive you and I are going to be. There are going to be times when your plans, your best laid plans, aren't going to work. So you got to have a backup plan. And there are going to be times when that falls through also. If you got 3 backup plans, you're on track. And I'll tell you, I learned this from a very, very successful businessman. And his attitude was, listen, you need at least 3 check and balance systems. He's in our country, we're supposed to have 3, and it doesn't seem to be quite enough. If you could get 4, that'd be even better. So I think this is a critical strategy for handling problems. Anticipate them in advance and have 2 or 3 backup plans, solutions, so that if one fails, there's one right behind it to step in and solve things for you. Again, if you do this, you're going to find you're going to eliminate most of the problems that you've been dealing with up until now. Here's key number 8. And this may be the most important key, well, at least one of them. You must develop certainty. Now, let me repeat that. You must develop certainty that you can handle almost any problem, no matter what happens. Now, remember that word certainty. It's the thing that so many human beings are seeking. See, people want to feel certain that they can deal with what comes up in their life. In fact, in order to remain feeling certain, what many people do is they stay in a situation that they hate. For example, I often see people in a relationship, and they really aren't happy together. They aren't working on even making their relationship better. They dislike each other. They're making 0 progress. But they'll stay in a relationship 10, 15, 20 years. Why would they do that? And the answer I found is that when you talk to these people, they say, well, I really should leave the relationship, but I guess I think about, what if I leave this relationship and then I never start another one? I never meet anybody else. Yeah, I'm unhappy, but at least I've got a relationship. At least I come home and I feel certain this person is here. Even if we fight, at least they're here. See, they'd rather deal with painful certainty than the ultimate pain of uncertainty. Because people are afraid when they're not sure what's going to happen, it could be worse than it is, and they hang on to what they've got. It doesn't make any sense, but it's the way human beings very often operate. So how do we feel certain? Well, a lot of us try and get ourselves to feel certain by working really, really hard. But is it possible to work really, really hard and then still have a problem come up and change things overnight? Is it possible, for example, to work your whole life, build a beautiful home for yourself and your family, and then one day have an earthquake take it away? If you doubt it, ask anybody in San Francisco. You know what's interesting? I think it's fascinating to look at how different people respond to a catastrophe like that. Some people use it in a way that totally disempowers themselves. Others use it as a way that makes their whole life and relationship and family closer. I do a lot of seminars in the Bay Area, and I talk to a lot of people that went through the experience, and it's really fascinating to see how their lives have been altered by the experience. Some of them have taken that experience and said, see, I can never be certain of anything again. Why even try? I could do everything right. It still turns up wrong. See, there's no reason to go on. And what a lot of them have done is they've taken that one problem and allowed that one problem to devastate their life and their family. Other people took the experience and said, you know what it did? It made us unbelievably appreciative of the more important things in life. That problem of watching our house crumble down brought us together because the first thing we thought to ourselves is, thank God we have each other. Thank God none of us got killed or hurt. Our whole family is here. And what it's done is it's reoriented us to not so much things in our lives, but to the most important things of all, our relationship. You can't believe what's happened. I'm so much closer to my son now. We're making a difference. My daughter is doing better in school. Her grades have gone up since the earthquake just because we have bonded so much as a family. Isn't it interesting how 2 different people can take the same problem and convert it into something different? They have used it to create more certainty. They feel more certain that they're going to experience more of the joy they want in their life because they used it in a way that has enhanced their feelings. I got a question for you. How would you feel if you were absolutely certain that no matter what happened, you could turn things around? If you knew that someone could throw any problem they wanted at you and it would bounce off you, kind of like Superman, right? The bullets just bounce off. Nothing was going to penetrate the quality of your emotional life, that you could deal with anything and make it work. How would that make you feel as a person? I can tell you that inside, and there are times when it wavers, I'll be honest with you, but 99.9% of the time in my life, I know I can turn around. And that 0.1% of the time when I fall off the wagon, all I do is do the things I taught you. Change my state, change the way I'm using my body, ask myself a better question and get back on track. How do I have that level of certainty that makes me feel like I can deal with anything? Well, part of it is because I've had a lot of pain. I've been through the most challenging times, and I've turned it around because I didn't give up, because I didn't ask, why is this happening to me? I asked, what's the solution? How do we turn this around? Not only how do we turn this around, how do we turn this around and make it even better than it was before? By using the very things I've talked to you about, I've created enough experiences that I can feel certain. It's kind of like a tabletop. I've got legs to the tabletop called references. That is experience after experience that now makes that tabletop feel solid, like it can stand on its own. And I've worked at creating those references. I'll give you an idea of what I mean. If you really wanted to, could you come up with references, that is memories, experiences you've had, to back up the idea that people are basically mean and ornery and they'll take advantage of you if you give them an opportunity? I bet you do. Do you also have references that could back up the idea that people are basically good, that they're honest, that if you give them half a chance, they'll really work to support you too? Don't you have experiences that would back that up and make that feel solid as well? Then the key, I think, is to look at our life and practice what I call memory management. To remember the memories, the experiences we've had that back up the ideas that make us feel certain, that allow us to know we can deal with whatever comes up. I'll give an example. On my 30th birthday, and it's interesting, I find that how after a birthday with a 0 on the end, we tend to reevaluate our lives a little more closely, as if it has any more meaning. For some reason in our culture, we tend to do that. At least I did, I'll just say that. And what I did is, fortunately, I've kept journals for years. And in those journals, I basically have recorded my life. I'm a big believer that if your life's worth living, it's worth recording. So I've got in there my goals from years ago. I've got in the challenges that came up, the solutions I came up with, the things I learned from books and tapes and people and situations. My journals are an incredible set of resources that I can tap into at any time. Plus, they show me how I've grown. And what's interesting is I took my journals and my daytimer, if you will, and I went back to when I was 20 years old. And then I extended it all the way back to 17. I made it 13 years in all. And I created for myself a large chart. And on it, I put the months of the year from the top, from January to December. And then across the page, horizontally, I put each of the years, going back for me to 1977. And in each month, what I did is I reviewed my journal. I wrote down key events that happened in my life, whether they be good, bad, or indifferent, where I could literally go back and say, what was happening in January of 1977? And I could compare it to what was happening to me in January of 1987. And as I did it, as I went through and created this chart, I got an incredible experience. I realized that I had been through heck and back, and that through all those experiences, I had turned it around, and I could see them there in front of me. It was different than just knowing inside my head. What it did is it gave me literally dozens and dozens and dozens of legs to back up the idea that no matter what happens, I'll find a way to make it work. I always have, and I always will. When you believe that in your gut, it gives you a power in dealing with problems that few people have. It gives you the emotional freedom, the sense of internal knowing that says no matter what occurs, I'm in charge. Gosh, it's an incredible feeling, and it's one you deserve. And so when you're done with this tape today, that's going to be your major assignment. Your major assignment is to at least begin creating a chart of the memories of your life for the last 10 years, where you're going to begin to fill in and maybe even talk to some other people around you. Because when this chart is complete, you'll find you won't be fearful of problems. Instead, what you'll do is you'll get excited about them. Because as I look back over those 10 years, I can see how some of those things that look like problems led to some of the things that I now value most. I had a problem years ago. I was supposed to fly to Denver, Colorado, but I had another engagement that I thought was more important to me. And they held me to my contract, and it made me angry because I thought, gosh, these guys could be flexible. They could reschedule it. They've got lots of opportunities. They could have somebody else speak on that day. I even offered to pay my way out of doing the event. I'd buy my time back. They wouldn't let me do it. It seemed like such a problem. But you know what? On that trip, I met the lady who became my wife. I look back and I remember when my kids came to live with me. 3 of my children are not my blood children, but they certainly are my kids, and I love them dearly, and our relationship has become incredible. But you know what? When they first came to live with me, oh my gosh, it changed the relationship with my wife pretty intensely. I mean, it really made me scared. Inside, I thought, gosh, I don't have any time with my wife anymore. These kids want to be with her all the time. I love the kids, but gosh, when do I get my time? And it was such a problem. It frustrated me. But you know what it made me do? It made me grow like crazy and figure out, how do I enlarge my heart? How do I allow myself to feel more in the same period of time, to absolutely feel my wife's love, to connect with her even more than we did before? And it also allowed me to be able to experience the love of my children, to create a bond that most people pray for during their lifetime. What an incredible problem. It created an incredible challenge, which turned into be the ultimate opportunity for expanding myself emotionally and spiritually and my family. See, what seems like a problem may actually be a gift. We just got to be willing to see that process. And as I looked over my life, I could see tons of these gifts. I could really see that these problems had enhanced my life, and I could see where it made changes and who I've become as a person. So when this tape is done, that's going to be your major assignment. You're going to want to take out a piece of paper and draw yourself the beginnings of a chart. You'll write down January through December, vertically from top to bottom, and horizontally, you're going to write the years. And when you're done with that, gradually, over the next few days, take some time, some concentrated time, maybe 30 minutes, maybe even an hour, to think about where you were at different months, different years, different experiences that have significantly affected you, both positive ones and also ones that seem negative at the time. And when you see them in context, When you look back, two things will happen. One, you'll say, man, I can survive anything. I've been through the tough times. I don't have to wonder whether I can do this. I've already handled those kinds of situations before. And two, it'll give you unbelievable certainty about your future. I remember years ago, when I was in junior high school, that's when we had the oil crisis. All of a sudden, we were in a situation where I didn't even have a driver's license yet. And I was beginning to wonder, gosh, would I ever get one? That was my big problem. Would I ever be able to drive a car? And what was interesting, I had a teacher that told us something I never forgot. He said, you know, young man, something you should remember. Human beings always solve the problems when they get big enough, when it's important enough. Necessity is the mother of invention. He said, don't worry about the oil crisis. He said, we'll find a way to turn the thing around, or we'll find a better solution. And then he read me this article, and it sounded like it was out of the newspaper that day, and it described how the whole world was going to go dark because oil wasn't available anymore, because we were running out of oil. You know what the oil was? Whale oil. Interesting. It was written in the 1800s. And he began to laugh as he read it to me, and I began to laugh too when I realized, hey, the bottom line is human beings are resourceful to always find a way. We need to realize we are human beings. We always will find a way, and feel the certainty that allows us to know no matter what happens, we're in charge, and to take worry and put it in its rightful place. Set it aside. Concerns one thing, worries another. Take charge of your life, handle problems from a state of certainty, and you'll come up with much better solutions. And let's go to our last 3 points. Number 9. Learn to solve problems, not just so you don't have any more problems, but so you attract a better quality of problem. What do I mean by a better quality of problem? What I mean is, your goal is not to not have problems. We've established that hopefully pretty clearly in this tape, and I've hit you on it over and over and over again because I really want that repetition to hammer inside your mind till you remember it, till it sticks with you. But in addition to that, a better quality of problem really means this. At one time in your life, you probably were struggling to figure out a problem and how to solve it, like how to pay the lousy bills. See, that's a pretty lousy problem. And if you focus on that, you're only going to get solutions on doing that. Till one day you say, I want a better problem. And the better problem is, how do I make enough money so I can take care of my family? How do I make enough money so I can contribute to my favorite charity? How do I make enough money that I can make a difference? How do I make enough money that I can influence the political process? See, when you ask those questions, you get a better quality of answer because you're asking and solving a better quality of problem, one that's going to expand you. See, as a society, we've had to deal with some of these problems. We have problems all around us, but they're better than they used to be. A couple hundred years ago, we're trying to figure out how to extend the length of someone's life. We're trying to figure out how to get somebody where they don't have to work 24 hours a day so they could just eat. Today, that's no problem. Eating is no problem. Notice how many fat people you see around you. Right? We have no problem doing that. Our problem is we've created a technology that has made it so much easier for man to do things that a lot of us spend most of our time in a sedentary fashion. Even when we're working, we think we're working hard and we're sitting there at our computer. Boy, those fingers are working really hard. See, the reality is we have to deal with the problem of all these degenerative diseases. And they're the result of us creating a solution to an old problem. So all we do is we now focus on something else. How do we increase our health, our vitality, and our energy while we simultaneously develop the technology that frees up more and more of our time? And for a lot of our youth, we've got to solve the problem of how do we get them to expand emotionally? How do we get them to have a spiritual path? How do we get them to make a difference when a lot of our youth are living in an environment where they can have virtually any choice met, where it doesn't take a lot of effort, where they literally expect instantaneous gratification? You and I have to figure out how to solve that problem so that our kids develop the emotional, spiritual, and physical muscles that allow them to compete and succeed in the 21st century. See, that's a new problem, a better quality problem, a problem that kind of inspires you. See, Einstein asked some interesting questions. He solved some problems. And in solving those problems, he may have created some additional ones that affect the entire human race. See, when we solve a problem, it doesn't end. We just come up with a better quality of one. And so we don't want to hide out from them. We want to seek them out. Focus on the solutions to the most important problems, not just the urgent ones. And you'll find out some of these little problems will just drop aside. You'll handle them easily. In addition, one of the most disempowering beliefs you can create for yourself is that things are outside your control. They're absolutely within your control the moment you decide to take responsibility. Now think of this word responsibility. Responsibility for most people is this big, heavy thing, just like problems. But the reality is response-ability, the ability to respond, comes when you take charge. When you say there is no problem that's too big, I don't care if it was somebody else's problem, I don't care if it was somebody else's challenge, I'm going to take control of it and turn it around because I want the muscle anyway. See, if you keep focusing on how you shouldn't have to deal with this, how it's somebody else's problem, the problem won't get solved, you'll just get more upset, and you'll find yourself in a position where the problem gets bigger, where all of a sudden it begins to affect you and create even more pain in your life. Just handle it. Point number 10 in having problems is this. Remember, you have no problems. You say, wait a second, you just spent 40 minutes talking to me all about problems. And you told me over and over again I should see them as challenges and solutions and all these different things. You told me how to deal with them. Now you're saying there's no problems? You're right. Develop a new belief. You have no problems. If you think you have problems, all you got to do is start comparing and contrasting with people in worse shape. You think you have problems? I suggest you take a trip to the morgue. You may discover you don't have any problems. A friend of mine is the chief psychologist at Bellevue. And oftentimes I've talked to people in seminars about how it's really valuable in life, not just to talk about another experience, but to go have it, to expose yourself to things, both positive and negative, that'll help you to appreciate your life more. And he decided to take some of his key psychologists and psychiatrists down to the morgue to have an experience, an associated experience of what death is like, so maybe they'd appreciate life a little more. And I'll tell you what, he took me on the same trip, and I will never forget it. I remember going in the hospital, and as we were going down the elevator to go into the basement, I remember looking around at some of these people that looked so sickly, and they looked so horrible, and I felt really bad for them. And after going to the morgue and having them open drawer after drawer and experiencing death in a different way than just how I think about it, like graduation, like moving on to what I believe may be a better experience. And many people believe what I believe in that area. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But the point is this. When I stood there with these persons' bodies right there, I realized I'm more than my body. Because you know what? They weighed the same, but there was no experience of a human being there. It was unbelievable. And I looked at one gentleman, he opened the drawer, and the man was my age, at the time 29. He was full of bullet holes. It was an unbelievable experience. He told me not to talk while I was down there, to just experience whatever I felt. And we talk about it later on. He wanted me not to blow off steam by talking or distracting myself. It impacted me emotionally. And I could tell you a lot about it, but in the moment I have left with you, I just tell you this. When I got back on the elevator, I looked at some of those same sickly people, and I realized they don't have any problems. I looked at some of those people who looked terrible, and all of a sudden they looked young and healthy, by contrast. I looked at my own life and realized I don't have any problems, and neither do you. You think you got problems? Remember, problems are a sign of life. If you don't have any problems, that's the only real problem I know of. If you got problems, you're healthy. Your key is utilize them, take advantage of them in so many ways as we've talked about, and realize how lucky you are to have this thing called problems. If you're not in the morgue, if you got your family, if you got your friends, if you have any portion of your health, if you can open your eyes in a free world and not worried about a soldier walking in telling you what to do, then obviously you don't have any problems. Might be good for us to remember. Here in America, we oftentimes lose perspective. It's real useful to realize how lucky we really are. And our final point 11, is real simple. Don't just solve problems. Take pride in solving them. Take pride in the result that problems create. Stop every now and then and take a look at something that once was a problem and now has shaped you for the better. Look at what you've done in your life. Look at the things you've solved and give yourself credit for who you've become as a person. Just remember, in the end, what you get in your life is not going to make you happy anyway. Who you become as a human being is the ultimate gift or the ultimate pain. If we utilize our problems effectively, we can become the kind of person that we're proud of. And when we come to the end of our life, we won't say, gosh, I wish I woulda or I shoulda. We won't feel like we only live 1/10 of our life. We'll stand tall and know that we live life fully, that we took these things we call problems and turned them into opportunities, and that we took this experience, this gift we call our lives, and we made it an adventure that we'll never forget.